Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello, and welcome back to the Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke podcast. I'm so glad you're here again. Thank you for taking the time to stop by and tune in. Remember, you'll be able to hear these podcasts on Spotify. You'll also be able to watch the interviews on my YouTube channel under the same name, Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. You know, interestingly enough, if you've been following me and maybe listening to my shows over the years, actually 4 decades, you know that I've had some incredible people here to talk with. And these are people that have made a dramatic difference in our industry, people that have taken the time to really do the research and be strong for us in our industry and work on the research. And many of them are formulators and amazing lecturers in their own right. And today, I think you're going to be really happy with my guest. Many of you have heard me before with this guest, and it'll be kind of nice. We actually get to see each other during the show. So let me give you a little bit of a background on my guest today. Neil Levin is the Nutrition Education Manager and Product Formulator for the natural products manufacturer Now Foods. Neil is a board-certified clinical nutritionist who has a diplomate in advanced nutritional laboratory assessment. He's a professional member of the International and American Associations of Clinical Nutritionists, serves on the Scientific Council of the Clinical Nutrition Certification Board as well. Neil is a director, program chair, and past president of the American Nutrition Association and serves on the Public Relations Committee of the American Herbal Products Association. His comments and articles are published in magazines and newspapers. He contributes to scientific journals and has been featured in countless radio interviews and television news reports. His articles you can follow on his blog, honestnutrition.com, and at nowfoods.com. He tweets as Neil E. Levin and is on Facebook as Honest Nutrition. So I'm so happy to say that my guest is here today. You're going to really enjoy this. Hey, Neil.
Hi, it's good to be back with you again, Jeff. I haven't seen you for, a month or so?
Yeah, it's been about a month. You know, we do get the chance and the pleasure to run into each other at shows and things like that. And Neil and I have been doing shows for a very, very long time, and he brings some amazing information to the industry. I thought we would talk today about standards. You and I have been doing this for a long time, and obviously there's been a lot of changes. There's been changes in legalities and scientific studies. There's been so many times when we've learned that things that we used to know, we don't really rely on that anymore. A lot of that has become obsolete with new techniques and new strategies. And obviously on top of that, the needs of the public have changed dramatically. Where are we right now in the industry? Are we on our way to a place that is much better? Is it a confusing time? What would you say about the state of affairs in the natural products industry today?
Well, it's always a challenging time in
True.
our industry. There's always new challenges. We're expecting another try to require mandatory label submissions to the FDA for dietary supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about, just for context, probably the safest food category there is. We know there's officially an estimate of about 5,000 deaths a year from foods, conventional foods. And rarely is there a death in any year from dietary supplements. So the safety margin, if you're talking about death as the ultimate safety issue, is really a non-issue for dietary supplements in general. I know there's occasionally some rogue company that does something, and requiring them to do things right is not going to affect these rogue companies because they're already cheating. It's like expecting someone to stop speeding on the highway because there's a speed limit. The only way to stop them is to put out cops and stop them because it's already illegal. Passing new laws doesn't change that. And requiring manufacturers to spend a lot of paperwork time for really no reason involved with safety, because you're not going to catch cheaters by making people who are following the regulations follow more regulations and submit more paperwork. All you're doing is making it more illegal to not do these things, but you're not really providing more safety or anything. The real answer is to use the existing authority, do inspections of all these companies, hire interns if they need to, and monitor websites and what's selling online, which is where a lot of this cheating is going on. Because frankly, there's a lot of independent health food stores, natural products retailers who curate their selections. They know their brands. They come to companies like Now, and they come and tour, and they talk to people who are doing testing, and they know what's going on. A lot of these no-name companies that are being caught cheating really don't have that kind of infrastructure. A lot of them are actually outsourcing their production. They're simply a warehouse and a mailing address, and they're not following good manufacturing practice regulations that requires them to audit their suppliers, to follow good manufacturing practices, which includes keeping detailed batch records, recording complaints, investigating adverse event reports. There's a lot involved in the federal regulations that is existing. And rather than focusing on the law abiding, they should really be focusing on the lawbreakers, who are really pretty obvious if you're looking at these ads and what's selling and the claims. A simple internet search by an intern would probably reveal dozens of these kind of characters and not require everybody else to do this onerous, time-consuming work of submitting labels. We've got 1,500 products in our brand alone, and we might make label changes several times a year if there's supply changes, other issues like that. Sometimes we want to change the wording on a label for a different claim. Every time we'd have to submit a new label to them and do that. Now, when I say that, our company already submits labels to the FDA for exports because we are required to get FDA approval on documentation in order to export our products to about 100 countries around the world. And then we have to jump through the hoops of these foreign governments and their health departments and their requirements. So we have a whole staff involved in doing this kind of paperwork. The smaller companies don't. They don't export. They're not having to do all these things. And the FDA is not looking at their labels and saying, yeah, these are okay labels. They meet regulatory requirements, as they do for Now Foods. So we're actually standing up for our competitors, the smaller competitors, to give them a chance by not jumping on the bandwagon with some of the big companies that have said, yeah, let's do this because it'll eliminate competition. We're not like that. We actually like the competition. We like the small companies. We partner with them in many enterprises, including industry associations like the Natural Products Association, American Herbal Products Association, and others, where we're actually developing some of the quality testing measures used by industry, publish them in peer-reviewed journals where they are accepted as industry standards for testing. And then we're not licensing them, we're sharing them freely with the industry because we know any bad publicity is going to reflect on the industry as a whole. It's not going to just be that one company. The headlines are going to be dietary supplements are unregulated, dietary supplements are unsafe, all this other nonsense that we hear all the time from people who are, it's like saying the highways are unregulated because they're not catching all the speeders. Well, put out some more traffic cops, you'll catch the speeders.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why do they try to bring the story to the public that we have absolutely no regulations and we have absolutely no controls and you're experiencing products that are not at a safe standard? This has been, this has been kind of the line that has been fed to the public for such a long time. And, you hear it enough. And even if it's not true, people start to think, well, do you guys even have any regulations? We have a lot of regulations.
Well, I think the issue, in my opinion, is We have products that are sold in bottles, in tablets, and capsules, and they look kind of like over-the-counter drugs or pharmaceutical drugs. And people are even using them for health issues.
Okay.
I mean, we're not allowed to make claims with a few exceptions that our products can do anything related to disease states. That can't prevent them, whatever. Vitamin C can't prevent cancer or colds or whatever without FDA approval, because that claim makes the product a drug, not a dietary supplement. Dietary supplements are defined in federal law as a special food category. So we're regulated as foods. And just as you don't require, why don't they require peanut butter to register if people are dying from peanut allergies?
Good point.
Why aren't they requiring products that are made in facilities that are processing peanuts or other allergens to register those products if they want to track them? Why don't they track genetically modified foods if they really want to track if these novel foods that are distinctly different enough from conventional foods to get patent protection, they're not the same? Why don't they track them and see if they're causing more allergies or deaths or other illnesses, or if they're different in nutrition? They don't even require that. So I think it's guilt by association is the way I see it. We look like drugs, so they want to regulate us like drugs. People take our products for health reasons, and they might not take the drugs. So again, there's a profit motive for people to try to regulate our products and restrict our products if they're competing with much, much, much more profitable pharmaceuticals.
Well, there's a few people in Washington, and it's the same couple that have been there for the longest time, and they just cannot get off this bandwagon where it's like they have it in for the natural products industry. And I just wonder, is it a financial thing? Is it a personal motivation? Because it seems like there's something that's driving them to continue this crusade of theirs.
Yeah, I mean, and we reach out to them. I've met with Senator Durbin, who's one of the fiercest critics of our industry. A few years ago, we had hundreds of our employees sign a big card that we sent to him and said, please visit our facility, see how our products are made, see what kind of regulations we follow. We're in your district, we're in your state. Please come and visit us. And it took a while, but eventually he came and he toured our facility. And we showed him how we test things, we keep batch records, we reject materials that don't meet our specifications. We make sure that everything in the bottle matches the label. We test for heavy metals. We test for microbiological contaminants, yeast molds, pathogens. We test for pesticides. We test for radiation exposure. We do all this testing. And at the end of the tour, he said, but you don't really know what's in this bottle, do you? After we just showed him how we do know what's in the bottle. So he came and toured. I got to give him credit for that. But he didn't have an open mind, apparently, if he didn't hear us saying, here's how we make sure that what we put on the label is accurate and matches what's on the bottle, in the bottle. And still, he had in his mind, you still don't know what's in here, do you? And I think he's swayed by these rogue companies that have been caught doing cheating. And, there was one last week or two where the FDA ordered some company to stop doing business and, that kind of thing. You can't sell your products anymore because you're not following good manufacturing practices. There's companies that they'll test a raw material, it fails identity of what it's supposed to be, and they use it anyway. So they're not following GMPs. They can get caught if they're audited. Now, the FDA is auditing companies like ours, and we have a third-party auditor, the former Underwriters Laboratory. So, we're audited by somebody to make sure that we're following good manufacturing practices, that we're testing raw materials, that we're failing them and not using them if they don't meet our standards. And why waste your efforts on these third-party certified companies that are big companies with who are working with the FDA? We actually share information with the FDA because we have more testing information than many other companies. It just doesn't make sense that they're devoting resources to testing companies that they know are following good manufacturing practices and not not auditing and reviewing all these little companies and looking for the ones making these claims and shutting them down. And the same with the Federal Trade Commission. They could be going after all these other companies that are making all these claims. We're a very conservative company. We're family owned. We don't make outrageous claims. We submit our claims to the FDA, which is actually required by regulation, but which I don't think a lot of companies are actually following that very well. So I think the enforcement is skewed and needs to be reformed and focus on where the problems are. It just doesn't make sense the way the enforcement is happening now. And for example, a few months ago, I think something like 600 manufacturers got a letter from the FTC warning us against making certain types of claims. Now, we don't make those claims, but there's a warning shot at us. Oh, you better not make these claims. And then there's publicity. All these companies got a warning letter. Well, not really, because it was just a broad scatter shot putting everyone on notice that they'll start looking at this stuff. They could have done that with a press release, not a warning letter. So it wasn't warranted. So just the regulation is not logical in the sense of finding where the problems are and focusing on them, which you would think if there was a central guidance system for the federal government or these agencies, they would actually use some triage technique and use their power where it's needed and where it would do the most good. And instead of making all these companies worried, oh, what did we do something wrong? Why are they sending it to us? Find where the problems are. I could point out problems to them. I could go on the internet and on Google search and find them probably half a dozen things in 10 minutes if I were
True.
just looking. And I don't know why they can't do that. Well, why they're focused on responsible companies, good companies. The other thing is there's already a database of over 100,000 labels that the National Institutes of Health has. And they don't share. The FDA wants their own. So, making us duplicate this database that we already have, or we already submit our label claims to them, and we submit our export labels to them. They're making us do something else now. Why? What benefit is there for the consumer? It's not gonna. It's going to raise costs. Basically, it's not going to provide any more safety when they're going after companies like ours. Now, I respect their mission,
They do too.
but it's still they don't have infinite resources, and these are going to be fee-based services, by the way. So the consumers are going to pay for this service that, in the most cases, is not going to do them any good.
I've been to your laboratories, and I was very, very incredibly impressed. We had to suit up from head to toe, and it was the cleanliness and the decontamination and all the parts of it were wonderful. And I remember there was somebody there, and I thought he said something that stuck with me. He said, we test the raw products when they come in, which I think most companies do. And he said, and if it doesn't fit the profile, we just pass on it. But then they go and they sell it to someone else who doesn't have the standards that we do. And I remembered that because, you may be getting something from a company where maybe they didn't do the testing. So I understand that, and I understand where they're coming from. But there are plenty of really good companies that do it well and do it legally and do it correctly and do it with not only the passion for the industry, but also making sure that their products are safe and healthy for their consumers. So, I agree with everything that you said. I see the industry kind of going through different changes. We've obviously seen so many changes, you and I both. Where do you see us going next with the industry as far as, safety and things like that? Do you think we just stay on the same kind of train that we're on now, or is it going to get more specific? I'm curious where you think we're going.
Well, there are moves both in Congress and in general in the society to increase the regulation of dietary supplement industry.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those issues is this mandatory label collection by the FDA, where if we make any minor change to a label, we have to submit a new label to them. And if you look at our labels, we have a product number and then we have a letter next to them, and that letter indicates how many different versions of that label there have been. And when we start seeing in the upper end of the alphabet, you could see that over decades we've made a number of changes to that product. And what that means is that large companies tend to have more resources to deal with that kind of thing. And I think we're seeing a split where the largest supplement companies, not ours, because we are one of the larger ones, but the larger ones that are publicly traded and worried about their stock price, we're family owned. We don't have that issue. The larger ones that are owned by pharmaceutical companies or other sources like that, they will end up having the advantage if there's more regulation, if there's more hoops for companies to jump through, that the smaller companies aren't going to be able to compete well. So I think we're seeing some of the large companies owned by pharmaceuticals and venture capitalists and all these other people who are not invested in the natural products industry, that don't care about whether something's natural or not, and don't care as much about the consumers as the bottom line. They're starting to say, yeah, this might be a good idea. Let's let the FDA do this. We can afford the fees. It'll cull out the industry and get rid of some of the smaller players, some of our competitors. I can't read their minds, but I'm imagining that's what they're thinking if they're supporting the FDA and some of these people in Congress who are trying to get more regulation of supplements and more paperwork that doesn't seem to have a real purpose. What other reason is there for vitamin companies to support that? They want to sound like they're more responsible. Maybe, but it hurts their bottom line unless it gives them an advantage over their competitors.
Well, let me ask you a question real quick while we're on this. What about the pharmaceutical vitamin companies that are in drugstores? They're pharmaceutically made, they're pharmaceutically advertised, they're made through those kind of same pharmaceutical companies. They're only in drugstores. Are they jumping through hoops too, or do they not have to?
They'll have to jump through the same hoops because they're dietary supplements.
Okay, I just wondered.
Again, they're huge companies with a lot of resources.
Got it.
I mean, we could do that and we'll raise our prices a bit. If you're a small company, you might be at a disadvantage going against the resources of a bigger company. So we're conscious of that, of the ecosystem, that we don't want to be the only family-owned vitamin company, the only one worried about standards and values in terms of, is it natural, is it non-GMO, how is it processed, what excipients and ingredients are we using, are we testing extra stuff? Most companies aren't testing for pesticides on their botanicals. Every botanical we have is tested every year at least, and often more frequently because of higher risk for certain things.
As it should be.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're doing that, but I don't think pesticide testing is very universal. I don't think heavy metal testing is universal. And, I think that's a problem for consumers because we're more transparent than others. And if they see, we have heavy metals in our products, they all have heavy metals. Yeah, they're in the soil, they're in the water, they're in the air. You can't have zero. So we have standards and keep it extremely low and well below all the safety standards. But someone else doesn't talk about it. Someone's going to think, oh, they have zero and we have a lot, which is absolutely, we might actually have less than someone else who's not even talking about it. And pesticides. We rejected an organic herb last week for pesticides. And we're like, why doesn't the supplier test for pesticides if they're organic? I mean, it's not a small company and they're selling it in bulk. Are we the only ones who find that? And if we reject it, what are they doing? Are they still going to sell it to someone else who's not going to know?
Guaranteed.
Because they were selling it to us and they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
They were quite willing to sell it to us. So, and it's not the first time.
What about around the world? Is this happening everywhere? Is the testing the same in other countries or no?
No, it's different. The amount allowed is different in different countries. For example, you can't use the B vitamin PABA in India.
Huh.
There's limits on how much vitamins you can use. The standard in Europe for iron in a supplement is 25 milligrams. So if you have for zinc is 25 milligrams. So we have a 50 milligram zinc we can't sell in Europe. And if you're looking at studies like the ARID study with the vitamins used for eye health and things, they're using high levels of zinc in those formulas that are not allowed in Europe. So Americans have more freedom to buy these things that match studies and that have safety profiles than there's something called the precautionary principle that they use in Europe, where they have much lower levels allowed. And in some parts of Scandinavia, vitamin D is restricted to 200 units.
Wow.
And we're selling typically 400 to 600, maybe 1,000 units in a multivitamin. Mm-hmm. And I think the assumption there is everyone's eating fish and getting plenty of vitamin D. If you're a vegetarian there, are you? Might you not need a supplement with more?
What about the Middle East? Because I know you're there. You do visit there. Is it different there too?
The Middle East is interesting because we're sold primarily through pharmacies and hospital dispensaries there. My trainings are exclusively to physicians and pharmacists. And I did one training for the Dubai Pediatric Club, which actually has members from the entire Arab world and Muslim world. So there were people there from Algeria to Indonesia. And
interesting.
There were over 1,500 pediatricians on my Zoom training for them. So, they're interested in how to use nutrition in their practice as an advantage. And, it's just talking about vitamin D. I'm showing data from local sources showing that 80+% of the population in the United Arab Emirates, Dubai in that area, or Bahrain, or places like Qatar where I go, that the vast majority of the population is deficient in vitamin D whenever they're tested because it's hot and they don't go out in the sun. They're covered up when they go out for cultural reasons.
True.
So, and the darker your skin is, the more the more exposure to sunlight you need for vitamin D. It takes longer because the sun doesn't penetrate darker pigmented skin. That's why we tan, is because that's a reaction to block the sun from making excess vitamin D and from actual oxidative damage to the skin. So, we're seeing different standards of what's allowed in these countries, and we rely on experts in those countries, our partners, in essence, who are importing and distributing our products, to know the regulations. Although we know a lot of them, we have staff that's actually studying these things, but we rely on the locals to work with the health departments in their countries to register products and make sure they're legal to sell there. But there's still counterfeit products all over the world. Brazil's a big problem Some other countries are starting to be a big problem. Saudi Arabia was selling bar soaps with our name, label, and logo on there. We don't make bar soaps.
Oh,
Somebody
wow.
was making counterfeit product of something we don't even make. If you can
They're
imagine that.
creating a counterfeit. Okay.
And it actually looked like a nice product. It was just not our label, our label on there, and it's not our product.
That's interesting. I never am surprised anymore. I mean, I'll hear something, I'll read an article, or I'll go into a room and I hear people having these conversations. And what I have been very happy about over the years, if there is the change of the mentality within the medical establishment. Because of course, when I first started, there was not much crossover, and it was definitely two different worlds against each other. There wasn't support. And now I have so many friends that are doctors all over the country who use nutrition in their practices, who write handwritten prescriptions for their patients to go to the health food stores to get their nutritional supplements. There's been an interesting kind of a change in that area. And I know a lot of doctors myself personally who are huge nutritional supplement consumers. So there has been that change. I just wish we were a little bit more on the same page, understanding about just getting good quality products and stop putting up roadblocks, when they do not need to be put up.
Well, in the foreign countries, I'm seeing more interest in the supplements as a complementary part of medical practice. I've spoken many times to the medical societies in the United Arab Emirates, hospital groups and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned the Dubai Pediatric Club. I've been invited twice to speak in person at the Macedonian Internal Medicine Society meetings in Skopje. I've been invited twice to speak at the Icelandic Medical Society meetings in Reykjavik. So, other countries sometimes are more open to these kind of things. And the farther east we go, the more likely our products are sold through medical or pharmacy type dispensaries rather than health food stores, natural product stores, grocery stores. They don't tend to have those kind of things once you get anywhere past Western Europe. So that's one issue. I think in America, there's more of a generational issue where as the older doctors age out and they're used to being the authority and the expert, and vitamins are expensive urine type generation, the younger ones have been more exposed to their patients using supplements, having to look up and understand some of these supplements. They might have seen more of the supplements reviewed in their medical journals, and they might be more open. So my understanding is that about every 20 years or so, there's kind of a shift in how the medical establishment looks at various therapies. And it's not just nutrition and dietary supplements, but in general, where there's more openness to new things from the next generation of doctors than from the older generation of doctors.
It's quite interesting. A lot of the people that are my age, my friends, my peers, a lot of them are retiring, and I think to myself sometimes, I always want to know what's coming next. I always want to know what's available, what's new on the horizon, what new breakthroughs are coming. And to me, I can't even imagine, because I've seen so much, and I have launched so many lines and so many ingredients and so many nutrients over my 4 decades on the radio, and now of course new platform with the podcast. But I love being able to pass on the information. I think people should have the tools and then be able to make up their mind on what protocols they want to follow through with.
Yeah, and one of the things that's been a big buzzword over the last 2 or 3 years has been personalized nutrition.
Yeah.
And for most people, the way they do that is, oh, the doctor says I have this or that, and I'm looking for some alternative to the drugs, so I don't have to go on the drugs. My my sugar's tending to trend a little higher, and I don't want to be on insulin or blood sugar drugs or blood pressure drugs if it tends to run a little high. What can I do to manage that naturally? And so that's a really big driver for our industry, but we have to be really cautious because we're not allowed to replace drugs or prevent disease. It's actually forbidden by the federal government. There's a gag order on that kind of thing, no matter how good the evidence is, by the way. And occasionally we get through something like we're allowed to say fish oil can help prevent cardiovascular disease, specifically hypertension. But there's a bunch of disclaimers associated with that claim when a company uses it.
True.
But there are a few claims like that: vitamin D and calcium for bone health, some of the carotenoids for eye health. So there are some of the fiber supplements and that kind of thing for regularity. So there are a few approved claims, but in general, we can't make any mention of those kind of things. We have cholesterol supplements to maintain levels already within the healthy range, so they don't stray out of that range. We can't say we're correcting them, and it's irrelevant what evidence there is, because it requires FDA specific authorization, or they actually have a category of things they allow to make claims even though they haven't formally approved them, that they're using enforcement discretion. And they've announced that they're not going to enforce anything against companies making those types of claims, with a whole bunch of disclaimers that largely negate the claims.
Well, I want to thank you. This is very eye-opening and also brings people up to date to let us know that number one, we do have people that are working in the industry to keep us safe and healthy. And there are many companies that are already doing it right and correctly. And there are companies that, really do think consumer and safety first. And I think that's really, really important. Neil, if you could leave everybody with a thought for the day, what would that be?
In general, the dietary supplement company is regulated more strictly than other types of foods. And that's despite being safer. And if you're sticking with mainstream companies, the familiar large companies that are sold in health food stores rather than online only companies, and you look for companies that are third-party certified for good manufacturing practices, you'll almost never go wrong in terms of having a product that's reputable and has good quality.
Well, I want to thank you for being here today. Everyone, make sure that you have everyone go to the platforms, Spotify, of course, my YouTube channel. Make sure you follow, subscribe, and send your friends, because the idea of this podcast is to bring you the most up-to-date information about the natural products industry from the best minds in the industry. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Neil, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure. Once again, we get to now see each other on the screen, which is even better. But thank you for being here today.
Yeah, you've been my friend for many years, and I appreciate what you do for the industry too. So
thank you. Well, everybody have a great day. Remember, this is Honest Nutrition with Jeffrey Burke. Don't be a stranger and bring your friends along. Have a great day. God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.